Congressman Garcia, sir, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Uh, Electricity, of course, is something that many of us take for granted, but for people in Puerto Rico, it's a matter of life and death. Hundreds of thousands on the island are currently experiencing outages lasting several days, all while already paying twice as much for electricity than what most of us in the state pay. We're seeing classes suspended, people being forced to throw out food, disruptions in medical services, and a family in Aguadilla losing everything after a power surge burned their house. This would not be acceptable anywhere else. So, why do we allow it to happen in Puerto Rico? Last year, this committee held a hearing to preemptively address concerns around the privatization of Puerto Rico's power grid, and yet a year later, with Puerto Rico on the brink of power supply crisis, we have this situation. A question for Mr. Fontanes. We heard earlier that as of June 1st, more than 3,000 ex-PREPA employees transferred to other government agencies. Why did P3 allow for thousands of PREPA employees to be transferred rather than to work for LUMA?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question and for the opportunity to address this topic. The way Act 120 is established, what the law required was that we allow the PREPA employees the opportunity to make the decision that they would like to make in terms of whether they wanted to join a private entity or they wanted to remain within the government of Puerto Rico. During the transition period, we did everything within our power to try to provide information to the employees at PREPA so that they could weigh in on what was better for them in particular, and they could make the decision they would like to make. So at the end of the day, most of those employees decided to stay with the government than to join PREPA. I would have to say that than to join LUMA, I'm sorry. I would have to say that, in my opinion, that it is a shame. LUMA provided better salaries, the same or better benefits than most of these
Yes,
employees.
thank you for your answer. I just, it feels like it's really wasteful to let skilled electrical workers serving as drivers to serve as drivers or security workers, especially at this time of Puerto Rico's energy crisis. Question for Mr. Stensby. Consumers have reported difficulties with accessing LUMA's customer service, especially when widespread outages occur. How have employees at call centers been trained and resourced to respond to these events? And do you feel that LUMA's customer service operation is currently meeting the demand for consumers?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Congressman. What I can tell you is that we we trained ahead of service commencement a very large number of call center agents. We now have 4 call centers around Puerto Rico. It was important to us that they were in Puerto Rico. We have almost 10 times as many agents as PREPA had as we moved into the transition. What we are seeing is a very large volume of calls. We've rolled out a number of digital channels for people, but we are seeing large numbers of calls. Um, and frankly, we attribute that to the fact that we are answering the phone. Our average answer time is in approximately the 10-minute mark.
And
And we're beginning to fix the system. And so
forgive me
that's causing
for
interest.
reclaiming my time. Is it adequate, sir? Yes or no?
Yes, for today it is, sir. Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Santiago, I want to make sure you get a word in. Um, how has LUMA engaged with community stakeholders prior to and following its acquisition of the TND system? Do you feel that LUMA has sufficiently responded to the questions and concerns of community members? And you have about 35 seconds.
Okay. No, not at all. Not before, not during, not now has Luma communicated with communities. In fact, we're working with a group of 10 community organizations in the Luma performance metrics case. And Luma this week said that they did not have to answer questions about the emergency response plan. Now, we have plants here in Salinas, Puerto Rico, that, for example, the Aguirre Power Complex is the largest electrical complex in Puerto Rico, that surrounding communities need to know what the emergency response plan is for that that infrastructure and the transmission system that comes out of that infrastructure. So LUMA is not responding at all to community requests for information.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.